Struggling to move your nonprofit forward? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Nonprofit Architect, where we are giving you the actionable steps you need to launch and grow your nonprofit organization. Now, here's your host, Travis Johnson.
Hey, welcome to the show. I'm here today with Spencer Brooks of Brooks Digital. How you doing today, Spencer?
Hey, Travis, I'm doing amazing. How are you doing?
You know what? I'm doing well. I don't think this show's coming out until April. We're recording this before Christmas of 2020. It's snowing in OKC right now. I got my mug of hot chocolate, and I am just happy to be here. So you do digital stuff, and you focus on health-focused nonprofits. But that's kind of an odd place to find yourself. How did you get there?
There's quite a personal backstory to this, but I can give a couple of the relevant details. So we were talking about this a little bit before the show, but I come from a fairly normal family, right? I'm the oldest of three kids. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. And when my brother was in college, he started to lose the ability to walk. And he was pretty much a normal college student. He could run around and just the average guy that you'd think of walking around a campus. And then all of a sudden, it's like he's having this trouble walking, eventually having to get a wheelchair, get the disabled card for his car. And as a family, we were trying to figure out what in the world's going on. The doctors don't really know. So we ended up going to the Mayo Clinic, which is kind of the place that you go if you don't know what's going on with you. And they couldn't figure it out either. They had some clues, but nothing was really certain. In the middle of all this, my sister, who's just engaged to be married, is diagnosed with cancer. And this is a double whammy to our family. And fortunately, she thankfully recovered from cancer and is living cancer-free. My brother, we still are on the journey trying to figure out what is going on. But that whole experience, for me, it made me realize that when it comes to a major health event in someone's life, it's not just about the person who is going through that, although that there's a huge impact, but it's also about the surrounding people, the friends and the family and the caretakers that are supporting them. And it's just a huge emotional event and burden. And so as I was experiencing this, I was also just starting Brooks Digital. And so at that point, we're a digital agency working, with kind of any client I could get at that point as we were starting up. And I ended up realizing that we worked with a lot of nonprofits as it happened, and even health-focused nonprofits that maybe specialized in a particular disease or disorder or something like that. And I sort of looked at these two areas of my life and I realized I have the empathy to understand how it feels to be in the shoes of a family member of someone who has a major health issue. And I also, maybe I can't cure cancer, or I can't make my brother better, but I can help these organizations who are providing information and support and resources to other people that are going through this same thing. And so that's sort of what the intersection of those two things is really what made me decide that, okay, Brooks Digital is like, we're going to be a digital agency, but we're really going to focus on empowering these health nonprofits to build out a digital platform that improves the lives of people going through this hard stuff. Because if I can make their narrative a little bit better, that's just going to make me happy. And I know how much that means for someone who's going through that. So that's a little bit of the backstory of why I got into the line of work that I'm in.
It's amazing when we can take what happens to us in our world and combine it with our skill set and our passion. And we find this nice little intersection of a niche in an industry that really needs it. I've shared my story plenty of times on the podcast, but I have family members with mental health concerns, and that's greatly affected my story. So I definitely appreciate you bringing value to the industry where you can. And I think that's important for people to realize, if you're listening to this right now, you don't have to be the end all be all. You don't have to solve cancer, but you could contribute where your zone of genius is to that industry and help them get closer to what they're trying to do. And if that's cure cancer, then that's wonderful. So thanks so much for sharing that, Spencer. But what do you really do with your digital agency with Brooks Digital?
We specialize in a few different disciplines. It's actually, speaking of being narrow, right? Even the services that I try to stick to are the things that are fairly relevant to health organizations in particular, but also just to, what our team is good at. And those are usually strategy work such as user experience or content strategy, as well as visual design and website development. And so those are areas that I found that health organizations and this is not just true of health organizations, it's, other nonprofits can have similar challenges, but in particular, health organizations, they're dealing with communicating to a variety of audiences. So you could have a particular patient or even multiple types of patients, as well as healthcare professionals. You could have caretakers and family members, and you need to be able to provide resources, and usually a lot of these different resources to different kinds of people. And so that creates a pretty large communications challenge to figure out how do you organize a website and your communications to speak effectively to all these different audiences and do it in a way that not just is good for the audience, but also is kind of manageable for everyone who's having to maintain it. You don't want to build out this, the nightmare website that takes 50 staff members to actually use.
Yeah, that's not the goal for most startup nonprofits, as far as I understand it.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are the things: user experience, visual design, and open source web development. Those are kind of the bread and butter things that we do at Brooks Digital.
And user experience is the thing that we're going to get into today. We were kind of joking around beforehand, what is the user experience? Why does it matter? Website loading times came up. If you're going to wait for 6 seconds for a website to load, you're already pretty invested. And if you're not already invested at second number 3 or 4, you're is this organization even worth the extra couple of seconds to load? And I thought that was so interesting in the just the microcosm of especially Americans in this first world digital society is if it takes longer than a couple seconds to load, you're already on to the next thing. You're already I can't even deal with these slow load times. I'm already moving on. But what do you mean by user experience for the people that might not be so familiar?
Yeah. So it's a good question. And certainly performance is a part of that. But I think broadly, to start with the very basics, right? User experience is this technology discipline that it improves someone's experience with a digital product, like a website or an app or something like that. And I think you can generally put it in the category of design, although I think in practice, it actually involves a lot of research and testing. So the way that I like to describe it is it's sort of like if you combine the creative pursuit of visual design, but then you pair that with the scientific method, you smush them together and you sort of get user experience. And so it's not necessarily just about creating this more appealing visual design. It's not just about making it prettier, because I'm sure you've seen, or I probably, at least I have, sites that look pretty, but they're not usable at all. So it's not necessarily about that as much as it's about stepping back and looking at the entire experience that someone has with your nonprofit's website or other digital, products maybe that you have, and working to improve that holistically.
Yeah, I've got a buddy, Stephen Kuhn. I actually did an interview with him. If you go back and look, he talks about how to turn your website into an active employee. But one of his things that he does is he calls it a grunt test. What is it? What's in it for me, and how can I get it? And if that's not solved on whatever the landing page is, you've missed the mark, in his opinion. Do you fall in line with that opinion as well?
I do. There definitely is that, especially if someone's totally new to your organization, that you need to be able to answer those questions really fast. If someone has to hit your homepage and then wonder, is this a food bank or a church? It's going to be hard for them to continue on the site. So I definitely think that that has to be outlined in clear detail. I also think that sometimes there's some nuance to that. You do have to realize, I guess, if you're thinking about your website, that people may not always arrive through the same path. So someone could hit your homepage, but you have to consider, is your audience finding you because they're searching for a specific article that you've written? or something that pops up in like a Google search and they're hitting that article first. And, that's what they want. And then, then you maybe have to think, okay, well, if that's going to be their first experience, how do we ensure that like the sub pages of our site have the right signals there to tell people what we do and not just the homepage? But I think broadly speaking, regardless of like what page you're on or how people get to the site, you do need to be able to have people clearly find that information. So I love the concept behind that, the grunt test.
Oh yeah, the grunt test. I love it. You mentioned articles, and if you are coming into the healthcare world, chances are you are looking for information on whatever the thing is. It could be diabetes, it could be cancer, it could be whatever the health concern is. And if you are in that space, it's commonplace to find information concerning what the disease is, potential treatment, and different kinds of articles. If you're listening to this right now and you're like, yeah, but that's like health nonprofits, I'm here to tell you, and I think Spencer will back me up here, is you should be publishing some kind of blog or content that will allow other people to find you. And you don't have to be the only one publishing the blog. You can have guest bloggers, people that are already in your industry that are already talking about the things that align with what it is that you're doing, that are already creating content. And you can just ask them like, hey, would it be okay if I host your blog on my website also, give you some extra exposure? They can have backlinks to their pages and all that fun stuff. But when someone's looking for that information, there's a chance that they'll find your page instead. And now you become this hub of information on whatever your topic is, and they have reasons to come back to your page over and over and over again.
That's a great point, Travis. And it's so funny. I almost like forget that because at least in my world, I'm like, oh yeah, of course you'd be doing that. But one of the things that I've noticed, so I work with clients that get maybe a few thousand visitors or less to their website every month. And I also work, and Brooks Digital works with clients that'll get hundreds of thousands. Like they're getting multiple millions of visitors to their site a year. And the key difference between those two types of clients is that the ones that are getting millions of people to their site every year have been writing and writing and writing, and they have thousands of pages that they built over years. So, if you're listening to this and going, oh no, I've got to write 1,000, like I'm 3 articles a day, go. No, like, right. It's like, okay, well, this is like a multi-year process, but that's the difference is it's kind of like the law of gravity. The bigger your site gets in terms of content, it's sort of like you're building up this little planet that starts to attract people from Google. And the more articles and pieces of content you add to that site, like the more gravity your site starts to get. And so I think it's a huge step to be taking, of course, appropriate to your resources. But any website that I see that's getting major traffic has been investing and has invested for a long time in their content to build it out to a point where they're getting tons of traffic from search and from other sites that are referencing their articles. And it just becomes a huge source of awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to have multiple ways for people to find you. I've talked before in this podcast about the know, like, and trust factor. Well, they can't know who you are as an organization unless they can find you. And one of the benefits of having something like a blog where even if it's short and sweet, you can write 9 sentences. That's 3 intro, 3 meat, and 3 outro. It doesn't have to be some diatribe or peer-reviewed journal article that you're coming up with. It can be hey, short and sweet. We're getting into the weekend here. Post in the comments below what your plans are for the weekend, or how do you plan on impacting X, Y, and Z, and post that as a question. And as the comments roll in, people are able to find this article and your website more and more through Google, which is the primary way people find things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'd also say too, one thing that I've noticed is pretty effective, thinking about especially those early stages in content is content. It serves a purpose, right? So you get someone on your website and like you want them to read your content, but at some point the ultimate goal is not just to get eyeballs on your site. It's to get them to do something. So the other effective thing that I see organizations do is that they get people to visit their site and then sign up for their email list or some other way that they can proactively reach out and distribute future content to those folks. And the Google Ad Grant program is one example of a good way to be able to essentially buy into search rankings that you haven't done the legwork to actually rank for. What I mean by that, well, start with the Google Ad Grant program. You can get up to $500,000 a year in free advertising from Google. It's a massive amount of money. It's unreal that you could get that much. Most organizations get like up to 120,000, but like if you manage the money well, you can get we have clients that are getting $500,000 a year. And they use that to buy into certain search phrases that would be otherwise very difficult to get organic ranking for, meaning like actually have one of your pages appear in the search results as determined by Google. And so they get into these search terms that are otherwise hard to get into, and then they direct people to a landing page or something like that that has a piece of content that's gated behind an email form, and then they successfully capture that person's email address, and then the future content that they write just goes out to that list. And it's like a very effective way of building up an audience. And you're spending this free money that you're getting from Google. And so they've seen people generate massive email, like hundreds of thousands of people on their email list from doing this kind of thing. And so it's kind of like a cheat code in a way. I mean, you do have to manage the money well, and there's these organizations that are doing this are usually paying not Brooks Digital, but other, companies to manage that. But I think the principle is still still good, in that you can capture that traffic, from an email sign up or something like that, and then be able to communicate with them in the future.
I wanted to make a short little comment here. I know we're talking about the user experience here, but like those of you that don't really understand why to create an email list and what the benefit is, let's just say that you get 100,000 people on your email list and you get 1% to do whatever you've asked them to do. That means 1,000 people are saying yes to the new t-shirt you came out with. If 1,000 people buy this new t-shirt at $25, then within a week, you've just generated $25,000 of income to use towards your nonprofit for whatever it is that you need.
It's huge. The numbers really add up. And there's some stats. They're called the M&R benchmarks. And I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, but they essentially have a metric where you can tell, like, you get per 1,000 email recipients, you generate, X dollars or whatever. And that could even be like a few cents, right? But if you're generating like 50 cents per 1,000 emails you send, to 100,000 people, and you send multiple fundraising emails, all of a sudden those numbers really do start to add up. And so I think it's mrbenchmarks.com that has a lot of that information. And I can include that link in on a page after the interview as well for those who want to follow up on it. But it actually puts a dollar number to if you have an email list that's this big and you send a fundraising email, here's on average how much money you can expect to get back from that. And so it's like a very tangible way of doing the math.
And it's a way to keep in contact with people that have already invested, even if it's with their interest, invested in your organization and what you care about. And I mean, if you have people that have said, I want to have more information about what you're doing, they've said yes to being on the email list, and there's no reason you shouldn't give them the opportunity to support you in other ways. That's one of the drums that I beat on a very regular basis around here, because people need to understand that it's okay to allow people to support your organization in whatever way they see fit. And if they want to give you a sack full of money every month, I say let them.
That's right. And the cool thing is, I guess, that if as an organization, if you understand that content is important and that an email list is valuable, then the question just kind of becomes, how do I make my content more effective? And how do I get more people to sign up to my email list and things like that? And the cool thing is, we're speaking about user experience. User experience is basically how to reduce the friction around those kind of things. It's about it's about doing the work to to understand and to tap into people's mind, their psyche, or just, makes it sound like some sort of voodoo. It's really just about having conversations with people to understand what kind of content do you actually want to read from our organization, or what things are you searching for? Like, what search terms are you using? And when you look at our site, like, can you tell me where you would go to sign up for the email list? And you'd be surprised at the number of people who can't find that. I sit on these sessions where you ask things like that, and it's honestly surprising. Like, you'll find, even if someone wants to give you money, like, I'm dead serious. There's like a large percentage of people who are actually, if they have a credit card in hand and you tell them go find where to donate, you'll find like 20 or 30% of people, with sometimes that they can't actually find the place to enter their credit card information. So it's like things like that. It's user experience is highly relevant to those sorts of things, because it just reduces the friction and it helps you be more effective at those things like writing compelling content, collecting email addresses, allowing people to give you the bucket full of money if they can find where to put the bucket. So I definitely think it's pretty pertinent to that conversation.
We're talking about the user experience here. We talked a little bit beforehand. Those of you listening, your website might be the only way that they ever interact with your organization. They might not ever show up to an event. They might never talk to you in person. They might not go, if you have a brick and mortar, they might never show up. So this might be the only way you have to interact with them. The question really then becomes are they going to interact with you more than once? And why would they come back? Are you giving them a reason to come back? If you have some kind of content, maybe a short blog that talks about what you're doing or what's going on in the industry, or maybe it talks about what kind of legislation is going through Congress, either at the state or federal level, that's going to interest them in what they're doing. It doesn't have to be something you can create. It can be something that you borrow or link to. It can be guest bloggers, like I mentioned before, Angie Francesco of the Squam Lakes Association. She had all their volunteers over the summer after COVID hit. They were posting little 2-minute clips showing the lake, or showing someone kayaking across the lake, or some little interaction. It doesn't have to be magical. It doesn't have to be well cultivated. If you're not a constant content producer like myself or Mr. Brooks here is, that's not a big deal. People don't care about how, the production quality or value initially. They just care that you're authentic and you're sharing the experience. If they can come along for the ride, YouTube has shown us that if you can bring the people in along for the ride with what you're doing, they're engaged, they're interested, they're invested, and they want to know what's going to happen next.
It's a good point. It reminded me kind of, we were talking about this a little bit earlier too, Travis, but that especially giving, like, when you give people that backstage view a little bit, it helps them to develop a relationship with your organization, which I think is very important, because unlike a for-profit business, it's not as transactional in the sense of you go and you enter your credit card information into this form, and then you get this package shipped to you with, a product that you paid for. Although we were talking about how actually that is effective to package, like, the public radio approach, packaging in like incentives and, t-shirts and mugs, that can be really effective. But there's still this idea that engaging with a nonprofit or charity in some way is there's less of a tangible piece to that. And so giving a backstage view, even through like, here's some volunteers that we highlighted, here's some videos, some things that we're doing today, right? Here's like what's happening in the office, or we're out in the field doing this, relief work, whatever. It helps develop a relationship with the organization. And, I think a lot of, fundraisers would be nodding their heads, right? You have to, it's a prerequisite to, getting money. And it's also not just money, but having someone volunteer or perform any other important interaction with your organization. And so, because like I said, the nonprofit relationship that a constituent might have with you is less just transactional. The constant, the stream of content from various sources is a relationship building tool. And of course, that's a pretty vital thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it doesn't have to be crazy, right? But if you have a longtime volunteer that's now moving on to the corporate world or retiring or doing something different, you can have a little farewell video or a little farewell message like, thank you for all your hard work. You worked on this project and this project and this project. And, hop down in the comments below and if you've had interaction with our volunteer, let them know what they've meant to you over the years and give them that interaction. It doesn't have to be carefully content crafted and curated. It can just be, hey, this is what's going on in our world right now, and thank you so much for being a part of it.
Yeah, I think an interesting thing is too, you'll probably find, certainly I find this sometimes through the research and interviews with constituents at nonprofits. It's part of the work that we do, but there's certain events and things that you can learn from people. Like if you're asking questions like, so like, tell me about the first time you started searching for a website that's similar to ours, or tell me about like where you were when you made the decision to volunteer the first time. Somebody will probably be like, oh, I was sitting at home and I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw this video of someone else who volunteered, or I saw this video of, the happy person or whatever the kind of work is that you do, right? The good outcome. And I said, oh, I need to do that. That would make me feel good. Though that's just one example, right? But you can ask them and they'll tell you the story. And it's literally gold, because in that moment you go, oh, they saw the video that we did, and that is the thing that actually made them volunteer. And so that you can get future videos and you can invest your limited time and resources into those pieces of content because you talked with someone and they actually they told you. But I think it really is about asking the right questions and doing a little bit of that research. And it doesn't have to be this crazy thing, but it can really produce some valuable insights into the specific types of content, events, and just things that help people make those decisions. So it's pretty fascinating how that actually plays out when you have a conversation with a real person.
Well, how does someone tell? We're talking about this user experience thing. How can someone that's listening to this, go in and evaluate their website and what that looks like? You talked about research, you talked about focus groups a little bit, but I mean, like, what does that actually look like for someone to go and do that?
Yeah. I think a good place to start is even determining whether that is appropriate and whether it's a limiting problem for your organization. I think that user research and user experience has a proper place, but it's certainly if this is year one and you're operating with like $10,000, you're probably not going to be doing like a serious user experience project. But the things that I would be looking for on your website that would indicate maybe symptoms of user experience problems would be like if your engagement metrics are kind of lackluster. And by that, I kind of mean Google Analytics stuff like the time on page, the bounce rate, like the number of people that just hit your site and then leave without doing anything, the amount of return traffic that you get. If those things are looking pretty lackluster, and there's not an objective scale. So if you're not satisfied with those, that's one indicator that your site might have some sort of user experience problem. Another thing is low traffic to key pages. So there are pages on your site that are very important, as we were talking about, like your mission and your vision overview. Maybe if you have like a capital campaign or something that you're trying to push people towards, your program pages, there's important pages that people need to visit on your site just to literally understand what it is that you do. And if you're seeing in your stats that not a lot of people are getting to those pages, there's a pretty good sign of whatever those important pages are for you. It's a good sign that you aren't providing a well-crafted user experience that's going to naturally push them to view those pages. And then the last thing that's kind of related is I think limited interaction with key design elements. And what I mean by that is you can install things called like heat maps and click maps and stuff on your website for free. There's a great tool called Hotjar that you'd normally have to pay $100 a month for, but they have free nonprofit accounts. And you can install it on your site and it will overlay and tell you where people are scrolling to on your site, where they're clicking. And what I would be looking for is, for example, on the homepage, like the area that we call it above the fold, like anything that you can see without scrolling. You want to make sure that there's not any gaping holes. Like, for example, one of those carousel sliders, like we usually find that if you're trying to display news or stuff that you really want to have people click on, oftentimes heat maps and click maps will show that people are avoiding that area. They're clicking maybe on your navigation or on stuff below it, but they're not really engaging with that slider. And so that would be an indicator that you have maybe a user experience problem, is if this very valuable real estate on your homepage is not being used at all. It's just wasted opportunity. So, and I think the thing is about those that they're also symptoms. It's fundamentally, I think it's about a disconnect between what a user of your website wants and needs and how your site presents itself in terms of its design and information architecture and resources. And that's the real problem. And I think it manifests in the symptoms of lackluster engagement metrics, slow traffic to key pages, and limited interaction with those key design elements.
You used a lot of technobabble in that last response there. You talked about Google Analytics and heat maps. And for the nonprofits that maybe have never heard this before, where can they go find out more information about what the heck you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take it down another level. And thank you for reminding me about that, Travis, as well. I know I can get deep into that stuff. But so for Google Analytics, that's a software that you can install on your website. It'll tell you key stats about how much traffic you're getting, like how many people are coming to visit your site, how long they're staying, what pages they're visiting, things like that. And there's just tons of great resources on Google Analytics out there. So I'm pretty sure I can probably dig some stuff up and put them on a page after the interview. But even Googling around like an intro to Google Analytics is a great starting point, and you'll get a lot of good stuff from that. And so if you have that installed on your site, then it's going to provide a lot of information for you to make these evaluations, right? If you're looking at those metrics, what I talked about, the engagement metrics, those all come from Google Analytics. And it even has in there are like benchmarks. So you can kind of get a sense of how does my site perform compared to other sites that might be in my same like vertical or niche. So if you're looking and saying, well, people are spending an average of 30 seconds on my site, is that great or is that terrible? Well, you can go and kind of get a sense of like how you're doing there and get a sense of whether that is lackluster or not. With the concept of heat maps and click maps as well, those are like Hotjar is a good place to go to kind of you can literally see a visual, but it's just another thing that you can install on your site as well that will track where people are moving their mouse on a particular page or where they're clicking. It kind of shows up as like those little hot spots, like the infrared glasses, right? Where it's like heat, this is a person's body because it's showing bright red and everything else is like purple or green or whatever. And it like literally overlays that same thing over your website. It's pretty cool because so you can see like where it's really hot, that's where people are moving their mouse a lot and clicking a lot. And so anyway, there's a lot of good stuff there. Hotjar, like I said, is a good resource for just understanding, like you can go and see some screenshots of what that even looks like and how to get started.
That's really cool. And like, so I'm thinking this, I'm trying to figure out like what that would look like if I cared, like if it was my website, I cared about where they were going. I would want people from my homepage to be going to my donate button. And then on that page, I would want to see the heat map hot right over where it says like submit donate, right? That's in my limited understanding of what we're getting into here. That's kind of how I visioned that mattering to me if I was a nonprofit. Like I want people to land here and then I want them to go to this place and I want them to complete the donate transaction. So if that's what you're looking for as a website and that's not happening, something's not right. If you are wanting to collect their email first and foremost, if that's your goal, and that's not happening, then something's not right. Is that about what you mean, Spencer?
Yeah, I think with the heat maps, they're not the end all be all, but what they really do help with is understanding just what people's behavior actually is. And to your point, Travis, like if somebody is going to your site and you want them to click the donate button, but you're not seeing that button light up like that bright shade of red that you want, then what you would say is, okay, I see that a lot of people are coming to the site and they're clicking on this link over here. Maybe they're clicking on the what we do or whatever, but they're not clicking on the donate. That just provides you with information, because you can interpret that a couple of ways. You could say, well, maybe my site's donate button is not clear enough and people can't see it. Or that could be that, people are actually coming to the site, but most of them haven't ever heard of our organization before, and they're not coming to just give their information right away. They're going to this other page. And so what it does is it gives you information where you can start to develop like these hypotheses, these educated guesses about it could be this or could be this. And they're all indications that you can actually take into and hopefully grab someone that have that real conversation with a person and say, for example, if you're thinking about, okay, well, if no one's visiting my donate page, is it not clear enough? You can go and grab someone and say, hey, imagine that I gave you my credit card and told you to donate $10 to my organization right now. Could you go do that on my website? And like sit behind them over their shoulder and watch them try to complete that task. And if you do that with a couple people and they all successfully complete that task, then you have a good idea that it's actually, there's not a problem with the donate button. It might just be that people, they are not ready to give yet. And so it actually helps you, like I think the heat maps and the analytics and all this stuff, it just helps you to form these educated guesses about why are people behaving the way that they actually are. The analytics and the heat maps show you the way that people are actually behaving on your site. And that, depending on what your goals are, it allows you to step through this process of having conversation and doing research in order to pinpoint the why. And then if you realize that, hey, people just aren't ready to give yet and they want to learn more about the organization, well, maybe you change the design of your homepage to actually tell more about your organization and help nurture people along that path and provide them that's the information that they want right away. So you give it to them. And then, ultimately that helps them develop more of a relationship with your organization and gets you closer towards that fundraising goal.
Oh, absolutely. And as you were helping to explain and dissect what that looks like, I was thinking about a time earlier in the podcasting career, the illustrious career of Travis, which maybe you chuckled right now and you know that I'm being funny, or maybe you've heard this for the first time and you're scoffing and like, I can't believe he thinks he's that great. I'm not that great. I just have a good time on the show. It's whatever. I had some people come to me and said, hey, your link to this thing is broken. It loads this error page and I can't get past it. And you might find that if people are getting stuck on someone on your website that for whatever reason hasn't updated or hasn't been fixed from what it is or what you thought it should be, and they're getting blocked out. And you might not know that until you go back and check this. As we're recording this, I'm experiencing where we did a migration to an actual website for what I'm hosting. And it come to find out that now, even though I signed up all these different sites to see where my show is, and you can go to, Apple Podcasts and all these different locations, because I migrated over, my RSS feed isn't up to date anymore, and it's a different RSS feed link. So I just, like right before we recorded this, I was hopping on with my team to try to figure out what it was, and we realized that when we migrated it over, the RSS feed link changed. So we had to go back, and where that was inputted, we had to change that link to get everything repopulating again. But we only know that if we get that feedback, if we take the time to go through what that user experience looks like, and we solicit feedback from our family, friends, and fans to come and tell us. And thankfully, we had some people that are like, hey, Travis, have you recorded any episodes past this one? Because I'm not seeing them. Yes, we are. Yes, episodes are going out every weekend. Yes, if something is not going the way that you think it should be going, let me know, because I might not know that it's broken. I can only fix and adjust if you give me that kind of feedback. So definitely appreciate my friends for helping me out there and covering my six on that when I had problems. But, what does that user experience say about you? If something is broken and that person's checking you out for the first time, they might not think that you're an organization worth donating to. They might not think that you have your stuff together and that you're going to be as casual with their money as you are with taking care of your tech. And we definitely don't want that for you.
It's a great point that you make, Travis, I think. Just because there's so much work that goes into the content that we produce and the work that we do. And as I'm sure you know, like to record a podcast episode or to write a big piece of, content for your website or all these things takes a substantial amount of time and effort. And if something is off about that experience, if a link is broken or something takes a long time to load or people can't find where to go, you just lose them like that. They're just gone. And that it stings, because you've done all that work to just get people to the point where they're aware of your organization and your work, and you've developed great content and resources. And if there's a problem that you're not aware of or something is off, then you lose them. And so I think that's like, it's the last mile, I guess, as I've heard it said, is like, you do all this work, but if there's a failure in that last mile, it doesn't matter whether you've come 1 mile or you've come 300 miles. It's all relevant. It doesn't matter anymore because there's a failure of that last mile. And so that's where I think the user experience process is really valuable. However much or however complicated or uncomplicated you want it to be, it is very valuable to help uncover where there might be drop-offs or where people might be having a bad time in abandoning your organization or your website, because you've worked hard to provide the resources and information and the technology that you currently have, and it's just a waste if there's something that's off that you don't realize and you don't have the opportunity to address.
Absolutely. And we realize that people spend the majority of their time soliciting donations and providing services. And we often forget as nonprofits that the user experience, especially with our digital interface with our website or our Facebook group or whatever it is, that needs a little attention and needs a little cultivation too. It's not a Ronco electric food dehydrator. You don't just set it and forget it. It takes a little bit of attention. And if that's not your zone of genius, that's fine. Maybe you contact someone like Spencer and you get his details and he can help you update this. And speaking of that, where can people find you, Spencer?
Yeah. So great place to start is the Brooks Digital website. It's just brooks.digital. It's not .com. It's one of those fancy new .digital domains. But there's great resources there for folks who want to learn more about user experience and digital strategy. I read a lot towards health nonprofits, but not exclusively. So there's some really great stuff that is on the website. You can also sign up for the emails there as well. That'll get you pinged about the content as we've been talking about this whole episode. And if you like to work with a big guy yourself, you can always send me an email, Spencer@brooks.digital, or if you have any questions that I didn't answer that are just burning in your head, always happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're listening to this and you have questions, you don't reach out to Spencer, why even listen? The whole point of this stuff is they come on, they share their expertise, and they want you to reach out to them because they want to help impact what you're doing. I love your heart for nonprofits, and I hope that we find something to help your brother's leg here in the future. And thank you so much for being a guest today.
Absolutely, Travis. Thanks so much for having me.
You've been listening to The Nonprofit Architect. To listen to all our past shows, visit http://nonprofitarchitect.org. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our show. Thank you.